Hi everyone, my name is Aditi Sriram and I'm very excited to be joining your storytelling session today. The story I'm going to share with you all is the story of the Sideways bun. Not my Sideways bun, I did not make this bun famous. No, this bun was made famous and made infamous by someone whose story that we enjoy telling around this time every year. Because this is the time in the Hindu summer calendar called Margari. And the story of Margari can really be thought of as the story of Andaal. Now, who was Andaal? The story of Andaal starts not now, not last year, not in the pandemic by any means, but in fact, 1200 years ago in the 8th century AD, where we have to travel in time and in space as far back as Sri Villiputtur village in South India, in Tamil Nadu. And specifically in that village, and specifically in the 8th century, to the garden of a lovely man named Vishnu Chitta. Vishnu Chitta was famous in the village for being a noble and kind soul, for being patient, for living by himself, not having a family, and for tending to his garden as if each blade of grass in that garden was his own child. And so it's no surprise, or it was no surprise to the village and to his fellow villagers when one fine day Vishnu Chitta was walking in his garden and doing what he does, watering his plants, singing to them, singing the praises of the Lord, generally creating a very peaceful, noble, loving, tender, divine atmosphere in his garden. And while he was caught up in his own singing, he thought he heard music coming from the grass and from the garden itself. Lo and behold, he looked before him on the grass, and what did he see but a small baby, a little baby girl. And her cries were not your typical baby cries. And we all know those baby cries. We've all heard them, right? In a big hall, in a movie theater, at the school auditorium, maybe at home. That's a piercing cry that makes you wish the baby would stop crying, right? But this was a different kind of cry. This one somehow felt like it was a song being sung. And Vishnu Chitta, or at least that's how Vishnu Chitta heard it, right? Which is again maybe how all parents hear their babies' cries. Maybe they think all their babies cry just like this one in this garden, with a melodious and sweet song. Although I think we all know that that's not exactly true. Anyway, 1200 years ago, maybe they cried differently. And this particular baby was especially peaceful and melodious and sonorous. And the man standing in front of her looked at her and fell immediately in love and said, "This is my daughter, and I'm going to raise her as my daughter, and I'm going to call her Kode. And she's going to help me be a better person and praise the Lord and pray to him every day and offer him everything that we can offer from our garden and from our home." And so he picked her up and took her in his arms, and she stopped crying. And so begins the next part of the story, which is how Kode grows up under the love and attention of her very beloved, very devoted father, who taught her how to love people around her the way that he loved the Lord, which was to not hold anything back, to be as loving and as gentle and as friendly and as compassionate as she could be. And in doing so, Kode grew up a very happy child, learning all about Lord Vishnu, learning about her village, being friends with everyone, singing and playing with everyone. And before we knew it, she was a young woman. Now, when I say a young woman, I mean that she was old enough to realize that it was time for her to take the next step in her journey to adulthood, and that was to get married. Her friends around her were getting married, and she thought, I too should do this. I want to be able to have someone with me as a life companion so that the two of us can take care of my father, the way that my father has taken care of me, and the way that I see others in our village taking care of their families, going to the temple, praising the Lord, praying to Lord Vishnu, and in that way carrying on with themselves. Except here's where Kode was different from all the other girls in the land and the village. And it's not yet because of the Sideways bun. I'm going to get to that, but we're not there yet. She decided that having heard all the songs and the bhajans and the stories that her father had told her since she was a baby about Lord Vishnu, She decided that it only made sense that if she was to find the perfect man, the most devoted husband, the most brave, courageous life partner, someone she would be proud to call a husband and a companion, the only suitable candidate, going by all of her father's advice and her father's way of thinking, was to marry Lord Vishnu. Okay, I'll say that again. To marry Lord Vishnu. The Lord Vishnu, not someone named Vishnu in the village. No, she means the actual deity that she would go and pray to in the temple every day with her dad. And she figured, my dad approves of him, my dad loves him, so this can't be so hard. If I want to marry Lord Vishnu, I'm sure I can just talk about it with my father, get his permission, and, my father can figure out the alliance. That's what the parents are for, right? To figure out all the rest of it once the girl and the boy have made their choice. Except when she told her father this, he was terribly surprised and very concerned, and he said, no, this is impossible. You have to marry another man who lives in our village or lives nearby. No human being can marry the Lord. And she said, but I love Lord Vishnu and he's the person I want to marry. And her father said, look, that's not going to happen. Lord Vishnu is not just someone milling around in the village or drawing water from the well or tending the next garden. He's Lord Vishnu. And Kode said, but you've taught me my entire life to believe that Lord Vishnu is in all of us. And so I want to marry him. This went on for a while. If any of you have tried to have an argument with your parents and found that they don't agree with you, you probably know that this can happen for a while. It goes back and forth and back and forth. So Kode went to her friends and told them, look, this is what I plan to do. But they had the same reaction as her father. And they said, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's how this works. But Kode took a vow. She said, I will take what's called the Pave Nombe vow. And I will get up every morning really early. I will bathe in the cold river. I will not eat certain foods. I will pray and I will be focused on Lord Vishnu throughout until he notices me and comes down from wherever it is that he lives, if it's not in Vishnu Chitta village, in Sri Villiputur village, and I will make sure that he comes and finds me. Because, that's what they're supposed to do, right? And that's what she did. She was steadfast in her vow. She behaved as perfectly and as appropriately as a girl taking this vow should do. And everyone thought she had gone crazy. So at first, there was no reaction from anyone in the village. They just sort of left her alone. And her father said, well, I can't take her to the temple like this now with me because this is just not normal behavior. Instead, I'm going to make her create the garlands for me that I have to take to the temple to put upon the Lord. And so that became Kode's job every day, was to wake up in the morning, find the best flowers in the garden, and make beautiful garlands that her father could take to the temple to put on Lord Vishnu. So here's where things get a little complicated, because Kode was no ordinary girl who would just listen to what people around her said. She was convinced and committed to believing that Lord Vishnu and she were going to someday be married. And if any of you have been to a South Indian wedding or an Indian wedding, you will know that garlands are involved. The husband puts a garland on his wife's neck. She puts it on his neck. There's sometimes games played to try to get the garlands on each other. And so making these garlands every day, Kode began to play a little game with herself. She would put the garland on herself and say, this is my wedding garland from Lord Vishnu to me. And now I'm going to give it to my father to put upon Lord Vishnu's deity statue in the temple. And it'll be like I have married him. And then the job is done, right? And she was playing this game one day when her father came in to collect the garland from her. And she knew that if he saw her with the garland around her neck, she'd be in major trouble. And it was when she was trying to take it off her neck, when her hair did this weird, funny thing, and that's where the bun comes from, according to me, anyway. So she had to quickly give it to her father. He said, you look really weird with that bun. Maybe change your hairstyle. And off he went to the temple. But at the temple, he noticed some hair, some of Kode's hair stuck in the garland, and he was furious. He came rushing back to Kode and said, make me a new garland. This is absolutely not how you behave. You can't be dirtying a garland for God with your hair. Please do it again. So Kode made a fresh garland and gave it to her father. He took it to the temple. But when he tried to put that garland on the Lord Vishnu deity, a voice from the heavens echoed and rumbled and said, this is not the garland I want. I want the first garland. I want the garland with that piece of hair on it. That's a very special garland for me. And Vishnu Chitta knew that something strange, but something very special was happening between Lord Vishnu and his daughter. He was very confused, but he was also kind of excited, and he rushed back home to Kode to tell her that something was going on, that he had heard a voice. It sounded like the voice of God. And as he came home, there was a man standing at the door, a very handsome-looking man. There was a certain glow about him. And Vishnu Chitta wondered, who on earth is calling upon my daughter in my home when I am out? Again, 8th century AD, so this is not a thing where people just hang out in each other's homes, especially strangers, and especially men coming to visit women. Not done. And he walked into the house, and there he saw his daughter speaking to this man and asking him, "May I ask, who are you?" And he said, I have come for my garland, the garland that you made. And Kode looked at this man, and the man looked at Kode, and Kode looked at her father, and her father looked at her, and her father looked at the man, and the man looked at her father. You get the point. Everyone looking at each other. And at the exact same moment, everyone realized what was happening. This was Lord Vishnu coming down in human form to come and find Kode and to do and complete that garland exchange that she had been dreaming about and conducting in her mind every day since she was a young woman. And they turned, the man and Kode turned to Kode's father. And Kode's father knew that all he could do was bless this couple and wish them a happily married life. He couldn't believe he was blessing Lord Vishnu and blessing his daughter. They prostrated before him and took his blessings. And then they walked toward the temple. Kode's father followed behind them. They reached the temple. They walked into the temple. They reached the sanctum where the statue is kept. They walked into the sanctum. And as they crossed over into the sanctum sanctorum, they vanished. And that deity, that statue, the stone statue in the temple just shone a little bit, and then it was done. And that is the story, everyone, of the Sideways Bun.